Tov, can you hear me? Wonderful. Okay, with great siyata dishmaya, we're starting the third perek of Pirkei Avos. Akavia ben Mahalalel Omer, Histakel b'shlosha devarim ve'ein ata ba lidei avera. If you contemplate, if you look at these three things, you won't come to sin. V'da mi'ayin bata, know where you come from, ula'an ata olech, and where you're going to, and before whom eventually you will be giving an accounting. Me'ayin bata, who are you? Where are you coming from? Mitipa srucha, from a putrid drop. Ula'an ata holech, and where are you going to? Lemakom afar rima v'toleya, to a place of earth, worms, and maggots. But before whom are you going to be eventually giving a judgment? Before the King of all kings, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So this, unfortunately, is, we're unfortunate are those who are familiar with this Mishnah, because this Mishnah is said at a funeral. At a funeral, always begins with this statement, with the mindset that the line that says, where are you going to the grave, it will cause a person to do tshuva, and that could awaken a mindset of tshuva for the people who have come for the eulogies and for the funeral. But let's go through it and try and get a basic questions and understanding as we go through one time, to get a deeper understanding of what Rabbi Akavia ben Mahalalel is teaching us. And as the Maharal writes, that whenever it starts with a new perek, then there's some very important message that's being taught there. So Akavia ben Mahalalel, he starts off by saying, you should contemplate the following three things. Now that phrase is a very important phrase. It says you won't come to the hands of sin. We spoke about this concept before, but there's a difference of the type of tools that you use when you're already clutched in sin, and the type of sins that you use, tools that you use when you're ahead of time out of the context. When we did the series of a Tahar Libenu, we had one or two shiurim on how not to get into the struggle. That was one set of topics and tools that we used, how not to get into the fight, not to get into the struggle. And there was a different shiur of when a person has got into the struggle, if a person has got into the struggle, then what skills or tools he should use in order to free himself. But you clearly see that Rabbi Akavia ben Mahalalel, he's talking about what you should contemplate so that you won't come to the hands of sin. Once you're already in the hands of sin, in the clutches of sin, that's already a later stage. Hopefully a person won't get to that. We're trying to precede that and not get to it. Now, we can just see straight away that histakel is not going to be a good tool to use when a person is already in the hands of sin. When a person is already in temptation, when a person is already in the clutches of doing an aveira, to stop and contemplate what's the meaning of life, who's God, who am I, where do I come from, where am I going to, that's usually a futile exercise to involve oneself in, and it's not going to be effective. But rather, since a person is involved in action, he has to take action to get out of that. But here we're talking about laying down a principle, laying down a mindset, a perspective, that if a person will adopt such a healthy, true perspective in life, which we're going to go and elaborate on now, then he won't even get to the clutches of sin to begin with. He won't even be in the arena where he's fighting or where it's a struggle. I don't know if you know anybody like this, but there are some people who seem, at least in certain areas, maybe not in all areas, but there are some people who, at least in certain areas, seem that in certain topics, they just don't struggle with those areas. They just don't seem to have a struggle with them at all. And you feel like, I sometimes, maybe even usually win, but it's such a big struggle to win. And for other people, it's not even an issue. They don't even struggle with it to begin with. So what we're looking for here is how to bring ourselves to a perspective, a mindset, that it won't even be a struggle from the beginning. Not that we're in a struggle and how to win, but how to avoid the struggle entirely. So that's his opening. These are three things that one should contemplate. You don't even get to the hands of sin to begin with. Now, one opening question that I didn't see the Rishonim ask, but I did see in the Hasidic works, is why does it doesn't do this anywhere else in Pirkei Avos to my knowledge. Why does it give an opening with a heading where it says what's going to say and then repeat itself again? It says, that was a heading, and then it repeats the whole thing again. You could skip the opening. It could just simply have said, look at these three things and you won't come to sin. Know where you come from, and here's the answer. Know where you're going to, and here's the answer. And know who you're going to be judged for, and here's the answer. Why does it have to give the heading, the opening, and then repeat the whole thing again? So that's a question number one that we're going to ask and hopefully get back to an answer. Why is there the repetition? Question number two, and this is the Maharal's question, and this is really a vital question, is if the goal of what Rabbi Akavia ben Mahalalel is teaching us here is that you should basically think of yourself as lowly. Where do you come from? A lowly seed, a lowly drop. Where you're going to, the grave, worms and maggots, you're going to be judged. If you're basically supposed to be thinking of yourself as worthless, then anyone who's tried ever doing this in that way, in that form, or anyone who's listened to the Tara Libeinu Shirim will know that that's the major tool of the Yetzer Hara, of how to get you to sin more. That when a person feels worthless, then the Yetzer Hara says, look, you're anyway worthless. So what does it make a difference anyway of doing more? Maybe it'll even pick you up. At least you'll enjoy yourself a little bit here in this world. So if what Rav Akavia ben Mahalel is teaching us is you come from nothing, you're going to nothing, you're worthless, and you're going to be judged for everything that you do, then that's not empowering. That's quite demotivating. So that's the question of the Maharal. Why is, at least at a surface value, what we're being told that's going to prevent us from coming to the clutches of sin, being presented with a perspective that you're worthless, when we know from our life experience that usually leads to the opposite. So question number one, why the repetition? Question number two, at a surface value, why is it teaching us something which has the opposite effect of making us feel worthless and then sinning? Okay, let's put those two questions out there and start going into an interpretation. I'm going to give some background outside, and this is based on the Maharal in general. Rabbeinu Yonah also alludes to it. I mean, he says it, but only as part of a bigger thing that he's saying. But the Maharal says it in a major way. Let's go with it. There are two facets to man, and there's a struggle, an eternal struggle, with which you identify yourself with. On the one hand, you have a higher, noble sense of self. On the other hand, you have a lower sense of self. Both of them are looking for desire and pleasure in the world. Oneg v'tanug, they're both looking for that. And you aren't one or the other. You have a sense of identity which is free to choose which one of those two sides it wishes to identify with. It could even be that you'll jump back and forth. There'll be times where you'll get your enjoyment and pleasure from higher, more noble elements, and there'll be times that you'll get pleasure from more base elements. That's the makeup, the design of how Kadosh Baruch Hu made us. He gave us from Shamayim and Neshama. He breathed into us from himself, and emanating from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And he also gave us from below, from the earth, from the afar, he gave us our body. Now, who are we? We are the ability to choose. We're the in-between, the able to decide who we wish to be. Now, here's where there's a big struggle. Before Chet Adam HaRishon, it was very clear to man, and there wasn't a struggle, that both his higher and his lower sense of self were good. His noble sense of himself, his neshama, and his body, it was very clear. Its body was all light then, not all with an ayin or maybe with an aleph. It was very clear to him at that stage that his whole sense of self was there for the sake of serving Hashem. So he didn't have an identity struggle. He said, I used both elements, my higher and my lower sense of self, for the service of Hashem. Just like anyone here wouldn't say that their head and their foot is less part of them. It's all part of the makeup of who they are. Just the head is higher and the foot is lower. The head has more of a function and the foot has less. It's all part of my identity. So at that time, Adam Arishon, he identified the whole sense of himself as the Soma and his body, all part of his being an Eved Hashem. However, after the sin, where bad came internal, now there's a very unhealthy situation that we're in, which is where we don't always recognize our real sense of self. And in fact, not only do we not recognize, but the opposite occurs, whereby we feel that our sense of self is our lowly self. That's the real sense of self that we have. And the upper one is something external. Let's just do a little experiment to prove that point. When a person wants to eat food, and let's say he's already eaten enough, but he feels like he wants to binge now. So his mind, if he's able to be thoughtful, if he's able to be insightful and look into his inner thoughts, which is always a good way of knowing your inner self, is to pause and say, what's my inner voice saying to me right now? Then he'll probably find that he's saying, but I want it, that's what I want. And then there'll be this far away external voice that will say, you shouldn't have it. You've had enough. Well, what just happened there? Where was the I and where was the you? So please note what's going on, right? The I want food is, but I want it. I want it, meaning there's an alignment of the sense of self with the more base side of oneself. And then there's almost an external voice, as if it's something far away and external saying, you shouldn't do that. Now, you could say from a social level, the reason that happens is because when a child is first born, he doesn't yet have an awareness of his neshama, and he's only aware of his body, and he's told by external people that what the right thing to do is. And therefore, it makes sense that he would continue to identify his sense of self with his body, because that's what he's used to from being a very, very young child, and the voice of ethic and moral coming from the outside. So that would make sense that he would do that. But from a much deeper perspective, that goes all the way back to Gan Eden, whereby the snake put his poison in us, the zuhama of the poison of the snake went into man. And what actually that poison do? It made us identify our sense of selves with him and see the voice of Hashem as something far away that we need to hide from, because we see it as external for us. And that became a terrible model that we use of how to view ourselves and the world around us. We view ourselves as base and wanting desire, and desire we align with evil or bad. That's how we align it, and we feel guilty if we give in to our desires, because we recognize that it's a bad thing, or we fall very low and we say, I don't care, I'm so into my desires that that's how I identify myself, I don't even feel guilty anymore. And then we view the voice of moral and ethic as something external to us. So the Maharal says, the core avoda that we have, and the core message that Rav Akavia ben Maharal was teaching, and this is basically coming to answer question number 2, which is, how is this going to help us? This mindset is unhealthy. This mindset is pushing us away. But now we're trying to get a deeper understanding. We're not looking over here for a quick technique of, if you're in the middle of doing an Aveira, how you can count to 10 and then distract yourself and move away. We're looking for something much deeper. We're looking for a mindset and a perspective that a person can adopt, whereby he views himself, aligning himself with elevation, nobleness, higher sense of self. And then when he views himself in that way, then he'll no longer be running after sin, because he won't see that as what's going to fulfill his desires. And then he'll be in a safe place. He'll be elevated. In Hebrew, there's a beautiful word for it. I lost it. But it means to like rise above something. Where a person is atzili. Atzili, that's the word in Hebrew. Like there's 4 levels of world. So atzilut is the highest level of the world. But it means like rise above noble. In the same way as you wouldn't get into a fight with a 3 or 4-year-old about something like very, very basic on his level, because you rise above that. If a little kid would walk past you in the street, I would say to you, you're fat. You're not going to start saying, no, you're fat. And you won't start arguing about whose mother is fat. Like, it's beneath you, right? It's not where you're holding. But even if he would start, right, you wouldn't go down to his level and start that fight, because you realize that you're above that. So ultimately, that's what it is with all sin. With all sin, the more elevated approach that you have of yourself, the more elevation you think of yourself, the more you'll be able to just remove yourself from the clutches of Aveira, because it's beneath you, you're Atzili. And Rabbi Akavya Mahalalel is raising us above that recognition. So let's see how to do that. We note that this is the question that the Noam Elimelech and the Avodas Yisrael and also the Netzivat Shalom brings it. They quote this following idea. They say, it says the whole phrase twice. And there's a reason why it's saying it twice. Because it's coming to contrast the two views, the two perspectives that man can have. The first one, it doesn't give you the answer. The second one, it gives you the answer. This is how you're supposed to read the Mishnah, Al Derech Hasidus. Look at these three things and a person won't get into the clutches of sin. Period. That's where the Mishnah ends for a moment. This is the higher level of thought. This is the higher level of vision that man is supposed to have. And that if a man wants to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu from Gadlus, from a higher level, from a more elevated place, then these 3 points of contemplation can bring him to that. And I'll tell you, I was just thinking whether this is good or not good, I'm not sure. I was just thinking during Mariv that these three things are exactly the first three brachas of Shemona Esrei. It was an amazing thing. The first bracha of Shemona Esrei is Magen Avot. So when you ask yourself, Da me'ayin bata, recognize where you come from, then your root of your neshama emanates from the Avos. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives you your neshama, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu chose you through choosing the Avos. You emanate from Gadlus, Eze Yichus. You come from Avram Avinu who discovered HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and Yitzchak who followed his path with Gvura, and Yaakov Avinu who was Miyaseh Torah and Emes as the roots. And you emanate, and that whole concept that we say in Chazal of Matai Yagiu Ma'asai Le'Maaseh Avotai, that's a form of Gadlus. I emanate from a great family. Imagine you were the grandson of the Gadol Ador, or the son of the Gadol Ador. Then imagine what a sense of pride in a healthy way, but also responsibility you would feel to continue that greatness. Imagine Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov handing over to you the baton and saying, we did that work, my son. You are going to continue us. Dain Ma'ayin Bata parallels Magen Avot. That's the first bracha, and that's giving us the recognition of Gadlus. Someone who views himself as a Ben Melech. Just the other day in Daf Yomi, they said there are 4 Tanaim who hold the Kol Yisrael B'nei Melachim Heim. B'nei Melachim, we're B'nei Melachim. That's how Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and 3 others viewed us, and that's how you're supposed to view yourself. We are B'nei Melachim. We are elevated. We are the people of Hashem, a noble people that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given us a special mission to fulfill. Someone who has that recognition that they're in a mission. You know where you come from. You come from greatness. You're not going to come to sin. That's Rabbi Akavya Mahalal's first point. Now the next point, which parallels the second bracha in Shemona Esrei, Shata Gibor, is Ula'ana Ta'olech. When you recognize that this world has a purpose, this world has a mission, this world is leading to an ultimate goal, it gives you a sense of mission again. Meaning, first of all, you have to recognize that you come from something very great. But then you have to recognize that you're working towards something very great. What you're doing now is building Gadlos, it's building greatness. Look what the second bracha of Shemona Esrei says. Mechayei meitim mata rav lo Hoshia. Mechalkel chaim bechesed, mechayei meitim berachamim rabim. We rely on you, Hashem. We trust in you. You free us. And we recognize the world is coming to a stage where your Gevura will ultimately be revealed, and that will be the time of Mechayei Meisim. So we know we're working towards a tremendous stage in history, which we're basically building now with our own hands. And we recognize the godless of who we are. La'ana ta'olech, you are building greatness through your actions. If you have that recognition that everything I'm doing has cosmic effect, has a very broad effect, that it's going to bring Kedusha down to the world, and it's leading us to a time where Gvuras Hashem will be revealed in the world, that can empower you. And not like that lowly side of oneself that can make a person feel worthless, but on the contrary, can make a person feel godless. And the third bracha that we say is Ata Kadosh Shemcha Kadosh Kudushim B'chol Yom Me'alucha Sela. The third bracha that we're saying is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you are Kadosh, and you've given that Kedusha to us as well. Kedushim B'chol Yom. There are 2 perushim what Kedushim is referring to. One Perush is the angels, and one Perush is Am Yisrael, and we say Kedusha, Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. Kadoshim b'chol yom yaluch, that every day we are praising your Kadosh Baruch Hu. Recognize that who you're working in front of, who you're working before, isn't something base, isn't something lowly, isn't something like if you were from a great family and you recognize you had a great mission, but you're working for Stalin, then okay, you're from a great family and you're building amazing things, but what's it all going to? Who's it all before? What's the great value in it? But when you recognize that all you're working for and who you're going to have to eventually present all your life's work before is Ata Kadosh, Shimcha Kadosh, is the godness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that gives you even more of a sense of empowerment, and that can raise you up, make you feel lofty and noble, and then the thought of sin will be beneath you and base. So those are the three perspectives that if a person contemplates, I come from great yichus, I'm working towards a great mission, and there's a HaKadosh Baruch Hu is my boss. He's the one I'm working before. He's the one who I'm answering up to. That can empower a person and lead into godless. That's vision number one of how a person could lead his life. That's how you will gain if you align yourself with the neshama, if you align yourself with the gadlus ha'adam. Now there's another option as well, which other people take, and it's not as advisable, but there's a way of responding to that too. There are people who they view the world as pleasure here and now. Their goal is to earn money. Their goal is to have physical pleasure, and what am I going to get out of it is always a question they ask when they're ever presented with anything. What's in it for me? What am I going to get out of it? What really gives them a kick, and this is an end goal for them, not a means to an end, is kugel and shawarma. I just recently, Rav Zatz and I were working on some programming for the boys, and we were looking up some place where there could be a tiyul or a place to stay, and it said there at the bottom, in footnote, it said Maslul Mahadrin. Right, it's some event, some tiyul place, and so there's a Mahadran option. So, oh, that's interesting, good for Karen B'Avin and boys, all very frum. Let's look what the Mahadran Maslul is. So we look at the footnote at the bottom, and what did it say? The Maslul Mahadran is that together with everything else, if you're there on a Thursday night, there's kugel and cholent. That was the Maslul Mahadran. We burst out laughing. That's what makes it Mahadran. If it's yeshiva boys, then if you're there Thursday night, that was hilarious. If that's your end goal, meaning, and I recognize that some people learn all the way through the night, and then the fact they have a bit of cholent at the end gives them indigestion and also gives them the will to learn all the way through. And I can appreciate that because they know that it's a means to an end. But once it becomes your end goal, right, that's your end goal, that's a problem. How do you respond to that? How are you supposed to see that that's where you're holding? Let's just be honest. It's ingrained in us since the Chet of Adam Arishon. We view ourselves through taiva. That's how we view ourselves. We view ourselves, our base self, through I want. And until a person has reached a more lofty, elevated stance, viewpoint, perspective, where he can rise above it, that's his view. That's how he views things. So therefore, the second section of the Mishnah is coming to address that point. That's why I repeat it twice. So we've answered both our questions now, the Maharal's question and the Hasidic question of why it repeats it twice, and also how it's building us. This is coming to answer when you feel that you have any drawing, not at the moment it won't work. As we said it beforehand in our introduction, but if you're sitting at a neutral place, not when there's Shunt and Kugel in front of you, if you're sitting in a neutral place and you're contemplating, who am I, what am I about, what's my goals, you're doing a cheshbon nefesh to calculate it, and you say to yourself, me'ayin ba'ata, if I'm only looking at myself from my body's perspective, and if I want to be, I'm not saying it's an ideal for me, but if I'm saying that's where I'm holding now, that's really where I'm holding now, then where have I come from? And you say that, well, from my body's perspective, really nothing. I mean, if you're telling me from my neshama, from Avram Avinu, from Yitzchak Avinu, that's very empowering. But if you say to me, my body, where does it come from? It's pretty pathetic. It's pretty base and it's pretty lowly. Now, chas v'chalila, not to say that at its core, at its root, that it's lowly. Everyone read Rashi on Parshas Bilam a couple of weeks ago, Parshas Balak, what Bilam says a couple of weeks ago, that when he saw that the seed of the Jewish nation and how HaKadosh Baruch Hu counts the seeds, he couldn't stand that concept. That was disgusting to him because he only views that concept through Tumah. But really, HaKadosh Baruch Hu views it as a point of Kedusha. He views the relationship where a seed comes out as the Kodesh HaKadoshim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu views it. But when you're only looking from the body's perspective, when you're only looking, meaning you're neutralizing it and separating it away from a higher avodat Hashem, then really what's it worth? Like, what am I here for? What am I going to gain? And when you look forward, it doesn't say that you will become afarim avatolea, but that's where you'll end up. Where are you going to? Lemakom. So what was it all worth? What, am I eating more just so that more will decay? Well, if you're looking from a lofty perspective, that's a different entire story. Then you can have great elevation. If you're looking at just for your physical accomplishments, this is an interesting exercise. Anyone who's read the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he has an exercise to do there, which is very, 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 I mean, as long as you're emotionally stable, it's a very encouraged exercise to do. He says you should write your own eulogy. Write your own eulogy and see what are people going to say about you. Like, what are you known for? What's your big thing? And if they're going to say, if their big thing is going to say that he never missed the kugel on a Thursday night, right? That's what they're going to say about you. He was always known to be the one to provide the rugelach, and not much was left over by the time he brought the packet to everybody else. If those are the kind of phrases that they're going to say about you, then you may find it humorous momentarily. When you look back and you say, is that what I want to leave in this world? It's quite a valuable exercise to write one's own eulogy. Write it from where you are now. If a person's life were to end now, chas v'chalila, what would they, if they were honest and not exaggerating, but just pure, brutally honest, what would people have to say about you? And are you happy with what's being written? And if you're happy, it's probably likely that you're looking at the first part of the Mishnah. And you're viewing yourself as a child of the Avos, and you're viewing yourself as bringing towards you Moshe Mashiach, and that you're recognizing you're serving before Hashem. That's probably where you're holding. But if you're holding the second part of the Mishnah, where basically all you come from is very base, and all you're working towards is just more decay, if that's where you're holding, that's what you're going to be praised about, kivyachol, when you get to the next world, then that's worth doing contemplation on. That's worth thinking about. That's what istakel b'shlosha devarim is worth valuable doing. The last point, and this one I want to really emphasize because this was a big chiddush to me, is the last phrase it says is that you should contemplate lifnei mi ata atid litein din v'cheshbon lifnei melech melchei hamlechem HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now hear this point very well. I think it's fascinating. How do we judge ourselves? Before we think about how we're going to be judged before HaKadosh Baruch Hu, how do we judge ourselves? Now it's interesting, you'll notice that we tend to judge ourselves based on our perception of how other people around us judge us. And it makes sense that it should be that way. Let's give a very simple example. A small child walks in the living room of the siblings, and he goes and he gives a slap to one of his other siblings. Now, is that a good thing or a bad thing? He has no way of knowing. He has no way of judging whether it's good or bad to give a slap. If he gets told off and rebuked, then he says, okay, that was out of order. Now I know that's not appropriate to do. And if everyone cheers him on and laughs, then he says, okay, that's good. I get rewarded for that. And be very careful, because when children make smart comments, witty but offensive comments, if parents laugh at that statement, the child has just learned a lesson. That's worth saying. I'm going to get applause and encouragement to say such phrases. So you as a parent have to be very careful that when behavior is inappropriate, you give the proper response. If you laugh along when he says something which is at someone else's expense, then you've taught him that's valuable to do. And then even if you say, oh, you probably shouldn't say that, that's Lashon Hara, and then he's going to say, okay, so here's what we have to do. We have to give lip service and say, I shouldn't say this, but, and then it's still worth saying because my parent will laugh at it. So you've given him a very, very clear message. Children only learn about themselves, what's appropriate and what's inappropriate, by their response they get from others around it. It's that simple in that area. Now let's take it a step further. When you're, let's say, in yeshiva, now there are some people, not yeshiva, let's say you're in the world. There are some people who you'll come and interact. Let's say you're in a university. So in university, you have a whole scale of people. There's people who are very, very frum, and people who are less frum. I'm not talking about any particular university which has yeshiva in general, but if you would imagine that there's a scale of people, some of them on the frummer end and some of them are on their way to being frum, but not yet there. So when you associate with them, what happens exactly? And this is very insightful. Hear this point carefully. You have within yourself a full scale of yourself. You have a very base sense of yourself, which we spoke about at the beginning, and you have a very high, lofty sense of yourself, which is what you're working towards identifying. And the real sense of you is what you align yourself with. Your real free choice, who you really are, is where you place yourself, where you align yourself. And as I said, you may jump back and forth, but over time you align yourself more and more with one way, and that becomes your path. Now, whenever you interact with someone, you put a label on them whereby you determine that they are over here on your chart or over there on your chart, or sometimes they're way off your chart, they're way beyond you in either direction. You give them a label. Now, whatever label you give them, it brings out that side of you. This is very important. Hear this very well. Unless that will be the natural thing that will happen. Unless you fight it. You could fight it. But unless you fight it, when you interact with someone who you judge to be at a certain place on that scale, you view them as very noble and elevated, or you view them as very lowly and base, then that will bring out that aspect of how you view yourself. So let's give an example. Let's say you are striving to be very noble. You want to be someone very elevated and lofty. And then you meet Rabbi Shechter. So what will happen to you when you meet Rabbi Shechter? You'll be amazed and you'll be inspired and you'll say, I want to be like that, because it's in tune with you. You want to be noble and lofty. That's what you're working towards. That's how you're viewing yourself. You meet someone who you view that way, and then it brings that out in you. You say, I want to be like that. That's who I aspire to be like. It strengthens that aspect of you. But let's say someone who views himself all the way down here. He views himself as very base, as sinning, and as a horrible person who no one else, if they would know him, if they would know his inner world, they wouldn't want anything to do with him. Now, what happens when he meets Rabbi Shechter? What's going to happen now? Busha. He's going to feel so embarrassed. What's happening? Why is he feeling? He won't feel elevated and lofty. He'll feel very embarrassed and ashamed. Why? What happens there? Because it brings out that part of him. He recognizes that in theory, he has the potential to be like that too. There's something there within him like that as well. And then he looks, well, where am I now? And he feels ashamed. He feels, I'm not what I could be. Now, I don't know if he thinks that those thoughts in those words, but he just feels horrible. It could be that he'll feel horrible. And why? What's happening? Because he's tagged himself as stuck down here. I'm stuck on this level. But in theory, I could be on this high level. So I'm worthless. This just proves to me how worthless I am. Now, it could be that someone's on a very, very low level, but they have aspirations to be very high, and then it could make them jump. That could be fine. But if they tag themselves as stuck on this level, this is who I am, that's it, I'm determined that way, then meeting someone very lofty, they meet Rabbi Shechter, they'll feel worse about themselves. And the opposite also occurs. If someone views themselves as very noble, and they meet someone very base, then they'll be very off-put and very disgusted by such a person. It'll make them feel horrible. Why? Because it brings out that aspect in them, and they can't stand that. They don't want to associate themselves with that. That's horrible. They're not horrible at that person. They're horrible at the thought that there's some element of that in them. Chas v'shalom. And therefore, I can't stand it. I view myself as up here. But if someone very low meets someone very low, they say, I'm not alone. Baruch Hashem, I'm not the only one in this very low place. I thought I was terrible Russia, and here there's other people like quite similar to me, so I'm okay. Because why? It brings out that side of them, and they identify with it. This is a very important insight, because it can give you direction. Should you or shouldn't you interact with people on a higher or lower levels than you? It depends, A, where you view yourself, and B, where your projection for yourself is. If you view yourself as lofty, but you feel yourself as going down, then you should not interact with low people. Bring that out in you. If you view yourself as lofty and you're secure in that place, then meeting low people is also good for you. It's also good. Whoever you meet will be good. If you meet high people, then it will bring out a noble side of you. And if you meet low people, it will bring out a rejection of that low side. And if you're right now in a low place, whoever you meet is bad for you. If you feel stuck there, if you feel determined that you have to be there. If you meet lowly people, it will justify your place. And if you meet high people, it will make you feel horrible, because you say, well, I can't ever reach that, and it's beyond me. It's not true. It's not true. Really, you could reach that, but you don't want to, so therefore it makes you feel horrible. And with this recognition, a person should, whatever level he's on, he should develop a wanting to be noble, to be lofty, to be elevated. Develop that wanting, that desire, and then meet people who are like that you wish to be. Because then it will bring out that element in you. Either way, it brings out something in you, but you get to determine based on your projection what you want it to bring out. This is a very important yesod. So now let's read the end of the Mishnah, which is tremendous now. What is the Musa? What is the Musa that Rabbi Hanania ben Mahalalel is giving? He's saying, Lifnei mi ata etid litein din v'cheshbon. Who will you eventually be giving calculation before? Lifnei melech malchei hamlochem HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So what's happening now? When you get to the world of truth and you meet HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself, then Hashem is mushlam. Hashem is perfect. What does that bring out in you? Like we've just spoken about. When you meet someone, it brings out that aspect in you. What does that bring out in you? It brings out in you the recognition that you are a chelek of Hashem. It brings out the recognition in you that you are perfect. You have the potential to reach perfection. You have the potential to be godly. That's what it brings out in you because you have that element in you. It's real for who you are. And if you're someone who throughout your life, you identified your sense of self with a lowly sense of self, if that's what you identified, then Miti HaKadosh Baruch Hu will be busha. It will be the biggest shame. What's the shame? It's not shame. It's not punishment. We're not talking here about woe to you, you'll be punished in the next world. All it is facing yourself and facing who you truly are on the highest level and what you have the potential to reach in this level. And when you're identifying yourself with a lowly sense of self, it's the biggest busha. You won't be able to stand it. Lahavdil, but like meeting Rav Shechter, if you view yourself as someone very low, it's a big busha. But if your whole life you are striving to do what's right, striving to do Ratzon Hashem, trying to always bring out the neshama aspect of you, always thinking, what would Hashem want from me in this situation, and do what you believe to be the will of Hashem. If that's what you're striving for your whole life, then when you go up to Shamayim and you meet HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it will be the pleasure, the greatest pleasure. You'll say HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that will bring out in you the neshama, and you'll say, that's who I always knew that I was. That's who I always identified my sense of self with. That will bring out that elevated side of yourself. So that's the secret, that yesod, that insight of whoever you interact with, that's what it brings out in you. And that's the secret what Rabbi Hanania Akavi ben Mahalalel is teaching us. That in this life, you are the point of Bechira. That's who you are. And you're always presented with a higher and a lower sense of self. And if you identify yourself with a higher sense, then viewing your past and your future and Hashem will encourage you and motivate you and empower you. You'll feel elevated and you'll feel atzili. And that will raise you above sin. And that's the solution. You don't have to fight with each Yetzer Hara. You don't have to get into the Yetzer Hara and then try and overcome it. You can view yourself as someone elevated and lofty. And then it's just beneath you, it's below you. You view yourself as your higher sense of self. And if you are currently viewing yourself in a lowly way, then question yourself, ask yourself, what does that actually give me? What benefit does it give me? Where am I coming from? From a body perspective, it's worthless. From a body perspective, all I'm going to accomplish, any money I make, any food I eat, anything which the body is going to feel that it's valuable in this world, if it's a means to an end, that's something else. Because then if it's Oneg Shabbos that I'm eating on Shabbos for the sake of Hashem, that's something else entirely, because my end goal is closest to Hashem. But if it's physical for the sake of physical, then contemplate, what actually am I gaining? Long term, I'm looking for pleasure. How is that going to give me long-term pleasure? And then recognize, busha is a healthy thing. Busha is what enables you to recognize where you're holding. If you feel embarrassed around someone, great, that's a great thing. That means you have a sensitivity towards it. I'll finish with one last story. When I was 6 months before Keren B'Yavneh, I came with a friend of mine. I didn't come with a friend. I came by myself, but I tagged on to a friend of mine to look at different yeshivas, to check out yeshivas. It was nowadays it's very common. Those days it wasn't so common, but from England it was, just a couple of hours away, and we had a break, so I jumped over and I went to different yeshivas, and Baruch Hashem, that's what gave me my clarity that I wanted to come to Keren B'Yavneh. But either way, I was at the Kotel with a friend of mine who will remain nameless. I don't think anyone would know him anyway. But we were standing outside, like where the men's section finishes, and then suddenly like a car drove up right to that place, and then like two big Hasidim jumped out, and then slowly a Rebbe came out, and then he was accompanied down to the Kotel, And I was in awe. I'd never met a Rebbe before in my life. In my high school, there weren't any Rebbes. So the Rebbe went down to the Kotel. So I asked some passing Hasidic-looking individual, I said, who's this? Now, for the life of me, unfortunately, I don't remember who it was. I wish I would. But it was someone who everyone said, oh, amazing things. And I said, wow. And someone said to me, you should get a bracha from him. And I, at that time, was very inspired about coming to yeshiva. And I was very, very looking forward to breaking free of the shackles of my co-ed high school that I was at that time in. And I couldn't wait to just like see myself in the perfect, idyllic life. I'd read some book which described yeshiva, which is hardly an iota of any remnants of what yeshiva is really about. But the way that it described yeshiva was everyone is perfect in a Shmiras Haloshen, and everyone has perfect storim, and everyone is looking forward to Yemos Mashiach and longing for the Mashiach. And I had a very, very idyllic life that I was looking forward to what yeshiva was going to be. So I was very, very driven to coming to yeshiva and couldn't wait for school to finish so I could get to yeshiva ready. And the idea of going to a Rebbe and getting a bracha for me was like that amazing. I left England for this. So I waited for him to come back, and I went up to him and I stuck out my hand, which I don't know if that was appropriate, but I did. And I stuck out my hand, and then I didn't know what to say. I didn't speak Yiddish or Hebrew, so I didn't know what to say. So he just like looked at me, and I looked at him, and then I said, bracha? So then he said, I don't remember what he said, but something in a language I didn't understand. And then my friend was hiding. He was hiding over there. And then the Rebbe left. And then I said, where were you? So he said, I can't. I said, why? So he said, I didn't wash Netilas Yadayim this morning. So I said, so? To be honest, I'm not sure if I did either. But I said, so? So he said, I'm tameh. Like, I haven't washed my hands. Like, I'm tameh. The Rebbe will see right through me, and he'll see that I'm tameh. I can't go up to him. And that was an amazing thing. I mean, he had a sensitivity of busha. But it was also not a healthy thing, because if you're not striving for greatness, and you view yourself as tameh, and then you view someone as lofty and elevated as someone who makes you feel bad by yourself, then in a sense, you're digging yourself in. You're saying, this is who I am, and I'm stuck here, and I can't reach it. It's a more healthy perspective to say, that's where I want to be. I want to be lofty. I want to be elevated. Let me try and connect to it, even if right now I'm not there. And that will enable you to get out of that state. So that's the secret of Rabbi Akavia Mahalel. That's so Yesod of Torah Nefesh. That Yesod of recognition. You don't have to get into sin and then struggle your way out of it, but rather recognize the fallishness, the baseness, the worthlessness of everything physical. Recognize that's not going to get you to an end goal. Recognize this tool that we've described of how to recognize where you're holding and how to get to where you need to get to, and then view yourself in a noble way, in a atzili way, coming from the Avos, working towards your Mashiach with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, who you're eventually going to connect to in this way. That gives you a sense of empowerment. That gives you a sense of being motivated, and then you're able to reach that goal of sin just not speaking to you and being way beyond it. Yashar koach chasdei Hashem yisbarach. Have a good night.